into our quarterly marketing budget. That gives you an idea. We shot this for a lot less than you should have for a TV pilot like this. So who are we? We're a company called Showrunner. We make software for smart studios, and essentially we make tools that help studios run like smart homes. In particular, we make tools that make virtual production intuitive for filmmakers. So directors, DPs, gaffers can use our tools to control the virtual world like they're used to controlling their physical devices. And we use these tools in the making of this pilot for a couple of reasons. But the main reason why you're probably here, and the main reason why we build these tools, is because virtual production is awesome. This is a shout out to Orbital Studios, one of our favorite studios. This is their giant wall that this video is on. But when you talk to filmmakers, they often will say this: I wish I had a giant budget to do that too. Virtual production is awesome. I saw those videos of The Mandalorian, but I don't have that kind of budget. They say this is great if you are Lord of the Rings, but what if you're making a regular TV show or a comedy or an indie movie or something that is more grounded with regular locations? And we've done a lot of research on the industry about how people are experimenting with virtual production, where they see the industry going, how professionals are seeing the different tools and technologies. We put together this report earlier this year on the state of the industry, and fewer than 10% of virtual production tours of virtual production studios end up turning into bookings. And that's in part because the case for virtual production, for commercials, for music videos, for advertising, is very clear to producers. It's a very clear case for it. But for filmmakers, there's this resistance to doing virtual production unless you have a really big budget, because there's this perception that it has to be expensive. So a lot of directors take these tours and then they don't bring their projects to a studio. They do things the old way. So in our survey, film and TV producers were saying, this is inevitable. We expect virtual production to happen as an industry, but unless the cost comes down, it will only be for high-end shows. So this is the perception that's largely there in the market right now. And so you hear, directors say sort of a different version of this, the non-financial version, which is virtual production is cool, but you can't get all the shots you want. You can't shoot small interiors. The cost of creating normal locations isn't worth it. Building out a regular office in Unreal Engine when you could just go to a regular office. And so you hear these kinds of concerns from filmmakers. And then, of course, the cost per episode of shows that use a lot of virtual production are at the very high end of the cost spectrum. So the question we had is, what if those weren't limitations, or those perceived limitations? What if those didn't exist? What if it didn't matter what kind of shot you were trying to get, or what kind of location, or how small the interior was? What if you didn't have to have a $15 million an episode budget to do virtual production? If that was the case, virtual production would literally democratize filmmaking. More people would have more access to tools that help them bring their cast and crew to locations far, far away from where they actually have access to. This is the promise that we who believe in virtual production foresee in the future. So if those limitations went away, that future would be here really, really quickly. So this brings us to that comedy pilot that I showed you a little trailer of. Is we decided to shoot a TV project as an excuse to attack those problems, those concerns that filmmakers have. Using our own tools, we wanted to specifically go after some of these things that people say are not feasible in virtual production. And so that became this show, Resignation, and this is a scroll of the 22 locations we had. We actually had a script that we rewrote with virtual production in mind to add more locations so that we could push the envelope with what we would do with a pilot. You don't have 22 locations in a pilot normally. And then we made a list of things that you can't do in double quotes in virtual production. Walk and talks, whip pans, low angle ceiling shots, grounded mundane locations, people sitting on chairs talking to each other, and then other bathrooms and other enclosed spaces. We made this long list, and we said we're going to do all of these in this pilot, and even if our crew pushes back, hey, there's a much simpler way to do it, we're going to do it in virtual production anyway. And we learned a few things in the making of this. And like I said, we were able to pull this off for a much lower budget than you would expect to in Hollywood. And I want to share 3 lessons from 3 specific scenes that we learned that are an example of what you can do with virtual production with the right tools and using some lateral thinking. So the first is the bar scene. Now, if you are shooting a film and it's going to take place at one point in a bar, you can get a not that expensive bar as a set. This is one of my favorite shows. It's Always Sunny. This is not an expensive set. If you're doing a television show, chances are you have built this set and it's there permanently, and this is not expensive at all. So why would you make this an Unreal Engine? Why would you spend all this time doing a digital version of that? So we have this bar scene that's very important to the plot. It's kind of where this sort of culminating series of events come together. And we said, well, if we're going to make this in virtual production, we may as well make it an awesome bar. So we rewrote the script to have them end up, the characters, at a very nice bar. So this is the rooftop bar at London House in Chicago, which is a very fancy bar. If we were to shoot this on location, this is like a Succession type of location of where they would go to the bar. We would have a very hard time parking, first of all, downtown in the Loop in Chicago. But we'd have to shut down elevators in this very expensive place. Be hard to squeeze all our crew and equipment up there. It would have taken us probably 3 days to shoot this scene. Also, this scene takes place from golden hour to nighttime. So like an awful time to be doing this. And we shot this in the middle of December in Chicago. So this would have been a very bad idea, not in virtual production. But we said, hey, we're doing this all virtually, so let's make this bar. And what we realized when we made this bar is by making the location fancier, we actually made it cheaper to create this location and in virtual production, specifically because so we worked with Miller Creative, which is a fantastic group that does virtual production art and world operating in Chicago. They realized that instead of building all of the buildings of downtown Chicago in 3D assets, they could fly a drone above London House, take some photos, and the camera, even though we have a lot of camera movement in this scene, you're not going to get much parallax at all on those buildings, so why not make them a photo? So they built this, they took some photos and then built some lighting in Unreal Engine, and then all we needed was a cheap railing, some cheap furniture, some cheap linoleum, and some interesting camera movements, and we could recreate this very expensive location. This would have cost us at least $100,000, even with an indie crew, to have shot at London House, and this cost us basically nothing. And then the camera movement and what you'll see here in this next clip actually really helped to sell this virtual location, this fancy bar. What we have here is you'll see the camera operator is going handheld, and our DP is shining a flashlight in his face to create this lens flare effect that if you didn't know that this was virtual production because you're here and I'm telling you this, there's no way. I dare you to take a screenshot of this and to find a place where you could be like, yeah, that looks fake. And kudos to them. None of this, by the way, was my doing. I'm just the messenger at this point of this very clever way that they pulled this together. But it looks like madness in my phone footage of this dance party of these kids dancing and playing around. You can see the flashlight there. But in the monitor, it looks great. And I'll show you a final clip here in a minute. But this was a very inexpensive scene to shoot. And we were able to do it in one day, less than a day of shooting. And so this is the first lesson that we learned is you need to think of virtual production primarily as a tool to turn a normal location into a better location. There are ways, and I'll show you, there's ways that you can actually save money. In this case, using a plate saved us money from building out a whole set. But certain scenes in your film will elevate the entire thing if you can make them better. And virtual production is a tool that you can use to convert something normal into something 3 times or 10 times better. So it's not always about cutting budget. Sometimes it's about stretching your budget 3 times as much. But this brings us to the other part of this scene in the bar the characters in this scene, they're kind of partying, some things have happened, and then they each go into this bathroom and look in the mirror, kind of contemplate what has happened during their day. And at first we're like, okay, we could just shoot in a bathroom, squeeze some crew into a bathroom, but we got to do it in virtual production, so what do? And we'd already turned the bar into a fancy bar, so we needed a fancy bathroom. Now the problem with, one of the reasons they say not to do enclosed spaces in virtual production is you kind of have to build a set to make it look enclosed inside of your LED volume, which doesn't make sense. You may as well just build a set. Unless you want to be close to the walls or have the walls sort of have light coming onto your actors, and walls don't emit light, so you can't get close to the wall or you have weird lighting effects. So what we did to solve this is we made the fancy bathroom, Actually, we took photos of a fancy bathroom and put them on one side of the wall. We shut the rest of the volume off, and then we put mirrors up to make it look like they were in a much smaller enclosed space. So it's a larger bathroom than it could have been. But all we did was photos, and then lit in Unreal Engine, and then some mirrors. And this is the scene of them with their dance party in the bathroom. I'm sorry there's no music on here. But see, in this bathroom scene, you can't tell that there's light coming onto them from the wall that's right there. Also, this actor one day is going to be a huge movie star. This is a Beck Nolan. But yeah, in this scene, they're there in the bathroom, and you would never know that it was virtual production. This was the cheapest thing to shoot ever, and it looks very fancy. We didn't have to rent the Soho House bathroom or something. So that's the first one, elevating your regular scenes. But now let's talk about a couple of ways to save costs doing some things that you shouldn't be able to do in virtual production. The next one is the walk and talk. This was actually day one of our shoot. We were really worried about this scene. Early on in the episode, our lead actress walks down the street in Pilsen in Chicago, and the Mormon missionaries come up and they start talking to her about, like, her mom has sent them to check in on her. And doing a walk and talk is very hard in virtual production. We had 2 shots, and I'll show you how it turned out. Here's Danny and the missionaries. We had one shot where it's them, kind of the camera backing up as they're walking along, and then one shot from the side, kind of intercut of them walking kind of down the road. And this is, here's again some more of my phone footage. You'll see when we start there we go. Start the movement here. Here they are walking down the street in Pilsen, and not a whole lot of people are doing much except our handheld camera, and here they are on treadmills. There's 2 shots that we got here. We had a video plate of our director literally walked backwards down the street in Pilsen to get this video plate. We had them on treadmills, and then a handheld camera held at about a 15-degree angle, sort of offset, not directly on them, sells the illusion. And that was one shot. The second shot is we had sort of a J-shaped volume, so this longer wall that they were walking this way. We had a video plate where we just stuck a camera on a tripod and we captured a video of a whole block of Pilsen in Chicago and just like stuck it on a tripod, the rectilinear lens, and just captured video of that block. And then they walked down, and we had some set deck, including, so we had a dolly followed them. My own car was in this shot. We just brought different members of the crew's cars in, and we just moved things down and got 3 takes of them walking along this street. So this is a second lesson that now is our kind of main rule of thumb for productions in virtual production, is it's not all 3D or nothing. Virtual production shouldn't be, let's use this one method of creating scenes and environments, or nothing. It actually should be a decision tree. So we actually built a decision tree to decide on when should you use 3D environments, when should you use plates, and when can you do a hybrid. Like that bathroom scene with just photos of a bathroom and mirrors should not have been built out hours and hours and hours by 3D artists. They could focus on some better work that they could be doing for other key scenes where 3D is important. So we actually built a decision tree that basically is, what type of scene is it? Is it interior, exterior? Is it an auto? Will the actors be interacting with the environment? Is there a faraway background? Where's the camera in the shot? Will there be lots of angles? Will there be camera movement? Will there be anything in the midground? And then it ends up with some outcomes. Build the midground and lighting in Unreal Engine and use a plate for the background. That ends up being one of the most common ways that we save money in creating scenes for virtual production. Certain scenes, you're throwing money in the trash if you're not using plates. And then certain scenes, you definitely need to be using Unreal Engine. You want to do some automation. So if you want this actual flowchart, I'll show a link towards the end, and I have some resources. But this is a weird, awkward video of me explaining something for a BTS series about this. There's a scene when at the end of this scene of the walk and talk, Danny goes into the coffee shop. So what we have is on one wall the video plate of the street, and then we use Pixera to put on the other wall the interior of our coffee shop, which that was built in Unreal Engine. It was a very lots and lots of angles. We needed that to be totally in 3D. But in our volume, we had One side of the wall is coffee shop, one side of the wall is plate, and then we have this piece of glass in the middle that's catching reflections from both sides, right as it's a real truck, but it was captured on the street weeks before, just on a tripod, right as that goes by. And so our director was able to get a lot more artistic shots by using this hybrid approach to virtual production, not being kind of beholden to only Unreal Engine, and in fact, mixing Unreal Engine with plates and using Pixera to pull it together. So that's the second. The third is this scene this day that everyone was scared of in our production that we called the Do-Si-Do. And this is something that I think is a very common and awesome use case of virtual production, and one that should be more common, which is we had our star actor, Josh Myers, who, this is him with actually my dog. We only had him for a couple of days. And he was in 9 locations. He's a busy actor and expensive for good reason, because he's amazing. But he had 7 pages of dialogue and only 2 shoot days. We could have tried to schedule him, in the new year, the next month, to get more days, and it would have cost more, and it would have been more logistics. But we're like, we got to squeeze him into the last 2 shoot days. So this is, again, a use case that I think should be a very good excuse for using virtual production. If you can get your actors, your cast, who have the hardest schedules to squeeze in, if you can squeeze them into more scenes or more pages in less time, that's great for them, and it's great for you for your budget. So day 1, we shot Josh in this opening sequence where most of the dialogue happens. He's in this crazy yoga loft. He's sort of this egomaniac tech guy, and his name is Shane because, he's a jerk, and that's my name. And anyway, so in this scene, we shot most of his dialogue in day 1, which meant we had, on the next day, 8 more locations to put him in. And it was mostly the improv stuff, short lines, but flashback scenes where he's in all sorts of different places. And so we designed this day called the Do-Si-Do, where at Resolution Studios, which is where we shot the second half of the pilot, we shot the first half at Smash Virtual. Resolution has a very awesome setup where they can reconfigure their LED walls to kind of any configuration you want, which is super valuable if you're trying to do something like this. But they built us 2 LED walls. So their main wall, this is a smaller version of that wall here, which is enormous. But the main wall got small, and there's a second wall, a flat wall on the other side. And so we took these 2 mid-sized walls, and we actually designed what we called a Do-Si-Do, which was a schedule for our art department to go ahead of time, set up the set deck for one scene while we were blocking with the actors on a scene on the other wall, shoot that scene, then set up the art on this scene while blocking and rehearsing on this scene. And here's a time lapse of us shooting 8 locations in one day. And we almost had a mutiny on our hands when we told our crew we were going to do this. Everyone was like, the Do-Si-Do, let's make it 3 days. Like, we can't do this. It's going to be awful. And to their credit, everyone said, well, yeah, let's try it. We actually wrapped early on this day. We planned so well that we were able to throw in an extra scene for the post-credits and wrap early. There was no overtime on this day. We threw in this scene where in the post-credits we hooked a glitter cannon up to showrunner, and then we shot him. American flag is not really a location. We call it America, I guess, but we shot this last plate of him in front of an American flag getting shot with glitter, and we were able to squeeze in this fun, silly thing because we had enough time to do it. So the third lesson is that a few people spending more time planning can equal a lot less wasted time for a lot of people. And that is the math, I think, of virtual production, is fewer people can set up the dance that you have to do in order to maximize your time on set. And they can be expensive people, producers and production designers and whoever it is, but that time is well spent if your whole crew and cast can be a lot more efficient. And so we know the case for virtual production for creatives. You can go to different planets. Creativity can be unbounded. As a director, as a cinematographer, as a writer, virtual production, there's this very great case for it. But this is, I think, the case for virtual production for producers. Producers are thinking, unless this costs less than the normal way I do things, I don't want to make the effort of learning how to do this new way of doing things because it doesn't do anything for my bottom line. But there's a case for virtual production for producers that you don't have to only do big, sweeping sci-fi landscapes. You can do interiors. You can do a lot of pages in one day. You can do walk and talks. You can do low-angle shots. There's all sorts of clever ways that you can get any shot you want in virtual production. And so the talking points that you can't do something in virtual production, there's no excuse. So producers like to hear this case study for that reason. But there's another group of people that need to get on board with virtual production that's really important. I would dare say the most important. And that's the crew, the people actually doing the magic of putting all these pieces together to capture the footage and tell the story that you want. So what's the case for virtual production for crew? Why would you change the way that you do things and not resist? Why would you learn this new skill set aside from this is the wave of the future and you're worried about your job? This is something that we worry about a lot at Showrunner is how do we make sure that that gaffer who has 30 years of experience lighting real scenes, that they can actually still work in the virtual world? Because right now, most gaffers show up and they use their regular lights, they light their scenes, and then they go and ask some group of people, programmers at a brain bar, can you please adjust the sun or can you please adjust this light? And there's a communication gap and barrier that leaves gaffers feeling pretty helpless. Same thing with DPs, same thing with the art department, production designers. And so eliminating the resistance for crew, I think, is really important in virtual production if we indeed want to speed up and save money and save time. Because if the crew takes 3 times as long because they're resisting and they don't know how to do it, that doesn't really serve the purpose that producers want in saving money. So on our set for this pilot, only 3 people on our crew had ever done virtual production before. Our world operator, our director of photography, and I'm trying to think of who the third, our director. Yeah, who's one of my business partners. So only 3 people had ever actually done virtual production before. And we put our tools in their hands, which are designed specifically for this. So this is like the pitch for Showrunner, is we want a director of photography or a director to be able to actually move the background themselves, from a tablet, from an iPad or a Samsung tablet or their phone, rather than having to ask some unknown person that they've never worked with, can you please adjust things? So being able to control the background yourself speeds things up a lot. Being able to control the virtual lights yourself. So as soon as we gave our gaffer the ability to change the sun, it blew his mind. He went and showed everyone on his crew, hey, I can change the sun now. Because suddenly you have more control and more confidence that you can do this, and it becomes fun. Your skills in lighting now translate to this virtual world. And then another set of features that we actually debuted during the shooting of this is what we call scene management. So you can't do a do-si-do day if you have to spend time dialing in all of your shots. You have 8 different locations. You got to dial in every shot and take hours and hours to get it to look just right. We dialed in the shots in pre-lighting, and then we saved our settings of our backgrounds and lights, and now we do cameras, lens, so that you can load up instantly all of the settings of your entire set. So being able to skip that time between setups and really just move set deck and move physical lights and the camera saves a lot of time and allows you to do that thing to do more with less. And this was something that our crew loves. So yeah, this is our gaffer up on a ladder looking at a tablet, seeing how the virtual world and his real world light here as he moves it physically all mesh together in the live feed. And he said after this shoot, I never want to shoot without these tools again. That is the kind of response we want from crews who are afraid of or hesitant about this new way of filming. And I think empowering crews to do their thing, to use their expertise, rather than learn some new set of terminology and protocols and computer programming and all of that, I think that's how we cross that gap with that third group. So if you want more information on Resignation, the show, including we have a behind-the-scenes series that it's a 10-episode series that's coming out on LinkedIn about how we achieved each of these sort of impossible things, how we did the walk and talk, how we solved audio issues with an echoey set in the first studio we were at, things like that. You can sign up to get those episodes here, along with some other stuff, including you want to see that flow chart. So I want to end by saying most of the things they say you can't do in virtual production, I'm convinced you actually can do. And you can do them cost effectively. I think there are very few things that you can't do as cost effectively if you do the right planning for virtual production. But there's one thing that I will warn you should not do in virtual production. And that is, if you bring a live alpaca on set with an LED wall, this is Rainier, our alpaca star, and you put alpacas on the LED wall, the live alpaca, you'll see here in a minute, he notices that there are other alpacas in the studio, and he would not face camera. He kept on turning around. His handler had to, I don't know if he wanted to make friends or fight or what with these alpacas. But if you bring real animals on set, they will think that the virtual production is real. So we eventually did get the shot. This again is Beck hanging out with the alpaca, eating some hay. We eventually did get the shot, but we had to turn off the screen, get the alpaca to face camera so he no longer saw alpacas, turn the screen on while he wasn't looking, and then get the shot. So in summary, virtual production looks real to alpacas, which is good news. Also looks real to humans if you do it right, and you can make it look real too. So with that, thank you very much.